So let's get into the peripheral vision aspect of it. So this is a post by Rob Luby. And so this is a post I found on a paranormal investigators group. Can we better see ghosts by using our peripheral vision? Many sightings of ghosts are reported as being seen out of the corner of people's eyes through what's called our peripheral vision. So we wanted to explore peripheral vision and ghosts because some wish to discredit the human ability to accurately see entities through anything but our central vision. Can ghosts be detected through the sides of our eyes? Let's explore. The argument against accurately seeing ghosts through peripheral vision has gained strength because we can be tricked into seeing things that are not there by our brains. While it is common for the brain to gather snapshots from the periphery and then fill in the blanks, known as the phenomenon of seeing something that isn't there, it is still possible that peripheral vision can enhance our ability to see and detect ghosts. Because many reports of ghosts seem to occur during the evening, maybe because people prefer to ghost hunt at night, allow me to briefly explain human eyesight in low light conditions. Receptor cells in the back of the eye can be divided up into two types: rods and cones. Our central vision, used for detailed viewing, relies upon the cones. Peripheral vision depends upon the rods. The differences between these photoreceptor cells give us different capabilities within our collective eyesight. And for viewing ghosts, that could be important to know. For example, when seeing in dark environments, it is well known that our central vision is weak due to reliance upon bright light, while peripheral vision is much stronger. The rods in our eyes used for seeing the periphery operate much better during low light conditions than cones. This allows the eye to detect light that is a billion times dimmer than bright sunlight. On the downside, seeing things out of the corner of our eyes does produce images with less clarity in most cases. But this is not always true. Although peripheral vision is not used to distinguish colors, it is much better at detecting motion. The combination of seeing no color coupled with the excellent ability at detecting movement could be another reason many have reported seeing dark, black, shadowy ghosts move from the corner of their eyes. If you still think this portion of our eyesight has little merit, then you will need to argue with the military. It is well known by the US Army that faint objects in the dark are better viewed by our peripheral vision. Troops are often taught not to focus on objects directly at night, but to direct their vision to one side in order to see them better. Coincidentally, contact lenses would be preferred over glasses in order to maintain a clear path to the periphery. Different. So again, this kind of supports the ghost theory because if these shadow people, if they're not really shadows, if they really are full color entities with high detail or whatnot, but if you could only see them out of the periphery, they would appear as a shadow even if they're not. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so let's move on to different frequencies and wavelengths of light. Humans see the range of light known as the visible light spectrum. The typical human eyeball can see the wavelength range of 380 to 750 nanometers. The various wavelengths in the spectrum of visible light are seen as different colors by the three types of photoreceptor cones in our central vision, spanning the full range of hues. Peaking near the center of the visible spectrum at about 500 nanometers, the vision of our photoreceptor rods is sensitized to the wavelengths of violet, blue, green, and yellow, though they cannot see them as colors but in shades of gray. The longer wavelengths of orange and red are completely eliminated from the peripheral part of our eyesight. Knowing this, we could say our peripheral vision is actually more focused towards monitoring more of the middle range of visible light and not interfered with by higher wavelengths. Could this be a factor that might somehow make our peripheral vision better equipped to see ghosts at times? Maybe. Although we have shared our thoughts about seeing ghosts through our peripheral vision, it is also possible to see ghosts through our central vision shadow ghosts included. Our point is that there doesn't seem to be one simple answer that explains the mystery of when, where, how, and why we see ghosts. Therefore, we need to keep an open mind. Okay, so here are my thoughts on this. Is it similar to so some people have 20/20 vision. Some people don't. Some people have very bad vision. So obviously this would factor into who can see what. Similar to how certain animals like dogs can see much better in certain wavelengths. So if, like, for example, we can't see infrared, it's invisible to the human eye. However, that doesn't mean that infrared doesn't exist. So if these shadow people or ghosts or a lot of these paranormal entities, if they can only be viewed in certain wavelengths, and once again, this goes both ways. So both to the observer would have to be capable of seeing certain wavelengths, and a particular entity, if they exist, would have to exist in a certain particular wavelength range. So different entities might have different ranges, and different people have different ranges that they're able to see. So if the periphery gives you slightly more in a specific range that certain paranormal entities might be in, that would explain everything, would it not?
Possibly.
That's all you got, Maxwell?
That's all I got.
All right, let's go a little deeper into the corner of the eye phenomena and shadow ghost. So this is from ASSAP.ac.uk, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, the Paranormal Education and Research Charity. So this is from their website. Paranormal reports sometimes include mentions of things seen in corner of the eye, occasionally as part of a wider haunting. Typically, the phenomena are fleeting and usually vanishes if a witness turns to look straight at them. So once again, does this support or debunk? Because if your periphery is capable of detecting motion and the wavelength and is optimized for certain wavelengths, when you go to look at it with the middle of your eye and you don't see it, does that help prove that it wasn't there, or does that help prove that it was, but it only exists in a certain wavelength? I'm just asking, Maxwell. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to read up on like the so-called scientific
Well, I'm giving you.
explanations.
I just gave you a lot of scientific information on what the periphery is optimized for certain
Uh,
wavelengths and for motion,
yeah.
and not specifically detailed. But let's look at another example. So let's say you have infrared goggles on, and you can see like let's say you're a burglar and you're breaking into an art museum, and they have these lasers for the security system. So you put on infrared goggles and you see the lasers. Then you take the goggles off, and you're like, oh well, must have been a trick of the eye. The lasers aren't really there. Is
I
that
see
what
what you mean.
is that what the corner of the eye is? It can detect. It's optimized for different wavelengths, so you can see it out of the corner of your eye, but you can't see it with the middle. So now I'm going to give you one of my experiences. So I've had this experience both while walking and driving, and half the time, I would say probably even more than half the time, it's not at night. It's during the daytime. So I see movement, like this dark shadowy movement out of the corner of the eye, and then I look at it because it gets my attention. Like my brain doesn't even have time to process. Is this a ghost? Is this a shadow person? It's like it's kind of like almost like a quick animal movement where it just draws your attention. So I just turn my head to look. I'm not thinking it's paranormal. I'm not thinking it's not paranormal. I don't have time for that. It's just an instinct. I look at it. It's not there. So then I turn back straight, and then it's there again. And now I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. Then when I try to look at it straight, I can't see it. And then I turn, and I can see it again out of the periphery. And sometimes this repeats multiple times, and then it's gone. So does that mean nothing was ever there? Does that mean something was there and it could only be seen out of the periphery? And when it was no longer there, my periphery couldn't see it either because it wasn't there. Your analysis, Maxwell?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, so let me go back to this website. So the corner of the eye phenomena. So yes, typically the phenomena are fleeting and usually vanish if witnesses turn to look straight at them. They are generally reported to look like shadows, often resembling faces or human figures. And by the way, I've never seen a face in the periphery, just figures. And I'm even going to dispute the human figures because I don't know if I would go that far to say they were human. It could have been an animal. I would say a lot of the times my snap judgment to look real quick For example, if I was hiking in the woods or whatnot, or even driving on a road, I might think it's a deer. So I look at to make sure there's no deer running across the road because I don't want to hit it and and have an accident. I personally have not experienced them to look specifically like human figures. Anyway, so for this reason, they are often called shadow ghosts or shadow people. Some people even think they represent some kind of demon or other strange entity. Corner of the eye phenomena. Before we can consider whether such corner of the eye phenomena might be paranormal, we need to understand what to expect from the normal operation of our peripheral vision. Here's a picture to illustrate how your peripheral vision can change the way things look. It may produce different results depending on your computer screen, the illumination in your room, and your own visual system, from your eyes to the brain. So nothing is guaranteed. Start by looking well to the right of the picture above so that it is barely visible. Note how you cannot see any shape in detail and probably no colors either. Now rotate your head leftwards very slowly, always staring directly forward so that you are aware of more and more of the photo. Gradually, shapes and colors in the photo should become more distinct and obvious. Eventually, when looking just to the right of the photo, you may become aware of an apparent face. The face will probably vanish as you finally stare directly at the photo. Don't worry if you don't see the face. We are all different, and some people will see it while others will not. The face is seen in profile, looking rightwards. Probably the best place to stare at is the tiny red flower about halfway up the photo and about 1/4 of the way from the right edge of the frame. Stare at the flower, and the large face, if you see it at all, should appear to the left. Try looking from different distances and the face may pop out. Even if you don't see a face, you may well see part of the picture. The lighter portion of the in focus bit appears to pop out from the rest. Some people may even see a face when looking directly at the photo. Others won't see a face at all at any time during the exercise. Either way, the experiment should still demonstrate that peripheral vision of complex shapes and colors, like those in the photo, is poor. You only really see the details photo well when looking directly at it. Using peripheral vision increases the chance of seeing faces and figures in random patterns. The area where we have a clear, detailed view of anything is surprisingly small. To demonstrate this, stare at one word in the middle of this paragraph. Without changing where you are staring, how many words can you read on either side, above and below? The answer is not very many at all. Peripheral vision. So how come the picture in your head looks so detailed if we can only see such a tiny area in high resolution? The answer is that our eyes constantly focus more of our eyes are more about rapidly scanning the scene ahead. Then our brains assemble the picture in our heads from the recent scans. For much more on this important topic, see common misconception. Outside the central area of the picture in our head, there is much lower resolution. Being used to it, you probably don't even notice this. Peripheral vision is produced largely by retinal rod cells. Unlike the cone cells that produce the central detailed views, rods have poor resolution. Rods are more sensitive to light and movement than cones, but cannot see color. Multiple rod cells converge into a single intraneuron cell. This reduces overall resolution, like merging several pixels into one on a TV picture, but improves sensitivity to movement. This poor resolution and high sensitivity to movement is what causes everyday corner of the eye phenomena, where you are vaguely aware of something in your peripheral vision but cannot see it properly. Rod's insensitivity to color and poor resolution means that corner of the eye phenomena are typically black and white and their shapes vague. If you turn to look at an object seen in the corner of your eye, you will start to see it in much greater detail and in color. As a consequence, it will look completely different. What was a vague dark shadow in the corner of your eye will turn into a differently shaped object in full color. Sometimes the difference will be so pronounced that the original object will appear to vanish. Due to the inbuilt human propensity to see faces and figures in random shapes, it is inevitable that some corner of the eye phenomenon include such shapes. Once we turn to look at them properly, they will no longer make sense as figures or faces. Our brains will then rationalize that this face or figure has vanished. It is no wonder that witnesses think they have seen a ghost or shadow person. Furthermore, our brains may substitute objects that are not seen as well, such as those in peripheral vision, with similar things from our visual memory. These visual substitutions, which occur before we are consciously aware of what we're seeing, can appear strikingly real. Such substitutions are not limited to just faces and figures, though these are common. That's super interesting because in John Keel's work, and we talk about him quite a bunch. I talk about him extensively on the Mothman series. You can check that out on the channel. He believes that a lot of these paranormal phenomena draw upon information already in the brain of the observer. So that's why throughout history you might see these weird paranormal entities in olden times dressed as they would back then. And in modern times you might get men in black or extraterrestrials or whatnot, because it's using information in someone's brain to fill in gaps, so to speak. What do you think about that?
That's interesting.
That's all you got, Maxwell?
That's all I got.
Maxwell Army. Distance is difficult to judge in peripheral vision, partly due to a lack of details and also because some objects may only be visible in one eye. No stereopsis, due to the nose intruding. The distance of objects seen in peripheral vision may thus often be wrongly reported. Something nearby may appear farther away or vice versa. In particular, a nearby small object can appear bigger and further away. Naturally, the effect disappears when you turn to look directly at the object. So a large object, seen as a ghost, in the middle distance vanishes, leaving only a small bush nearby. Shadow ghosts. Of course, some people believe that shadow people and shadow ghosts exist as genuine paranormal phenomena. There are reports of shadow ghosts seen when looking straight ahead. One possible explanation for shadow ghosts seen in direct vision is actual shadows. Shadow ghosts are also sometimes reported in photographs and videos. These are usually photographic artifacts. However, where shadows are seen only in peripheral vision, the explanation given above must certainly be considered. If people are convinced they are living in a haunted house, they may notice such natural phenomena more acutely than usual, sensitized to the idea by psychological suggestion. Once again, I'm going to counter that point by saying if that house really is a haunted house, they'd be more likely to see these entities. So both are true. So once again, I'm not going to fall for the black and white fallacy either. If the house is not haunted and a person believes it is haunted, then they would possibly see more shadow people. Just like if the house is actually haunted, if the entities are real, they would also be more likely to see more. So I don't see how that debunks it. It's kind of, again, fallacious. An interesting point about shadow ghosts is that many are typically seen to be moving. If they weren't, they probably wouldn't be noticed. There are motion illusions related to peripheral vision that may account for certain specific sightings. The peripheral drift illusion occurs when you observe an object with alternating black and white and sometimes gray lines or rectangles, or something resembling that situation. When such objects are observed in the peripheral vision, anomalous motion may appear. In real life cases, this might occur in a semi-dark situation with fence posts, railings, stair banister spindles, or wheels, particularly if they are painted white. The illusion is thought to be caused by the way our brains detect motion in our visual fields. So once again, I completely agree. So if 90% of cases occurred around these things, then that could possibly be an explanation if shadow people aren't real. If they are real, what would stop them from appearing where there are also stair banisters, railings, fences, or wheels? Like, why would they be allergic to appearing around those as well? And then, of course, this doesn't factor in shadow people seen in flat plain type areas or in areas where there are no such objects. The other thing I'm gonna say, because I've experienced that as well in like cluttered basements and such, where I thought I saw something. And once again, maybe it was a shadow person, but instinctually, I didn't feel that it was a real moving object. Once again, all depends on how much you put stock into intuition. So when I was in a cluttered basement and I thought I saw movement, I didn't have the instinct or intuition that it was an actual real being or object moving. Whereas when I noticed it either walking outdoors or while driving and I looked at it and it wasn't there, but I could still see it in my periphery, my instinct is that it was something real. I mean, it could have just been a deer that was going between trees and I didn't really notice it when I looked straight on, but because the periphery is better at detecting motion, or it was moving whatever in the shadows, it could have been a deer. I'm not saying I saw a humanoid figure. I didn't. But if we're putting stock in intuition and subconscious, I felt that situation, it was an actual moving entity, whereas in a cluttered basement, I didn't get that feeling that it was a real moving entity like a deer. I don't think there was a deer in that basement, whereas there could have been by the side of the road. Okay, so let's move on to night vision. In low light, our retinal cone cells do not work and we rely on our rods. This means that the world can look radically different to the one we know from normal daylight vision. One problem, though, is that rods need time to adapt to reach maximum sensitivity in low light. Some 30 to 45 minutes to get to 80% or of full sensitivity. Even once you have adapted to night vision, there are more problems to consider. Poor resolution. Object shapes are not seen well and can be misinterpreted. No colors visible. Objects tend to resemble either shadows or white lights. A shift in sensitivity towards the blue end of the spectrum in the Purkinje effect. Autokinesis, small stationary objects appear to move if you stare at them. Night blind spot, best eyesight resolution is 50 to 20 degrees off center. Poor depth perception and poor ability to see exactly where moving objects are. Once again, I'm going to say this. The reason why most people might be spotting ghosts at night is because, once again, the periphery is more designed for that. So, does that disprove they're seeing? Wouldn't that increase the amount of frequency that, if paranormal entities are real, that they would be seen more often at night?
I can see that.
Yeah, so once again, it's just so fallacious to just completely debunk all of them, whereas this could prove it true as well. It's just pretty interesting if they're real. Of course, once again, we don't know, but if they are, this would prove the sightings at an increase would prove the reason for the increase in sightings at night. These significant changes in vision in low light can help explain many apparent paranormal phenomena seen in low light as examples of misperception. In particular, this also applies to investigation vigils held in the dark. And once again, if there is some of these haunted locations, people see quite a few ghosts in the daytime and at night, and they describe the ghost wearing the same thing. So how are they going to account for that in this explanation? And once again, I'm not saying that 90% or even more or less, I don't know, could easily be explained by all these things. Might be true, but since we don't know, we're not going to pretend it's true. Low light misperception. The various visual impairments brought about by low light conditions inevitably increase the possibility of misperception. Such misperception, as in the daylight version, can be affected by psychological suggestion. In particular, the night blind spot means that objects seen straight ahead look fuzzy compared with those seen at a slight angle, like 15 to 20 degrees off center. In daylight, we see objects straight ahead best, so there is a tendency to do the same at night. It means, however, that objects may easily be misperceived by staring directly towards them. This fact alone may account for many reports of ghosts in low light conditions. Incidentally, this is not the same as the anatomical blind spot, which does not normally affect vision in daylight or at night. Small moving lights are quite frequently reported on vigils. These lights could be produced by LED indicators for instruments or domestic appliances, or from light thrown on the walls from gaps in curtains or under doors. Whatever causes such lights, if you stare at them in the dark, they will usually appear to move. This is autokinesis, and it may be responsible for reports where people claim to have seen orbs with the naked eye. Ah, man, that's kind of interesting. I'm sure you've been in your house at night and you've seen a crack of light under the door. Did it appear to be moving? I don't really, I don't recall any cases where that happened.
I don't remember anything. I don't know. I haven't seen
I mean,
anything like
the
that.
only thing I can compare this to is sometimes driving at night on a highway that doesn't have reflectors and is not well lit. I do remember certain lights of cars having a certain drift effect, especially when I was tired while driving. But I'm not going to mistake that for a shadow person or a ghost. That's kind of weird. Again, I'm not, obviously, I'm sure there are certain people out there that have made the mistake. But again, since we don't have the percentages, if ghosts are real, 90% of them could have seen a real ghost, and 10% could have been had this misconception of light. So it's kind of, yeah, once again, we don't really know how to ascribe percentages. Though night vision allows good perception of movement, it is more difficult to say exactly where a moving object is in low light. The fact that everything appears black or white in low light can also give rise to shadow ghosts or ghostly white figures. Finally, the lengthy time required by eyes to adapt to low light means that for long periods people may see very little at all. Such sensory deprivation can sometimes lead to hallucination. Unfortunately, these factors typically combine a dark vigil. In typical vigils, divided up into several dark sessions separated by well lit breaks, night vision adaptation times are a real problem. For much of the time, investigators will not be able to see anything, much even when it is there to be seen. For these reasons, dark vigils are of limited value for scientific evidence, because central vision is dominated by the cone rich fovea, which doesn't work in low light. The other thing they're completely ignoring here for some reason is when videos, especially in night vision, are used in some of these dark vigils and they match up with what the investigators are seeing. Or sometimes on security cameras, when these so called alleged ghosts, if that video is real, they match the description seen by multiple witnesses. So that's a bit strange. And one other point is that why ghosts can appear to be white if they can only exist in that spectrum, and or the human eye can only see them in that wavelength with those colors, would explain why they would be seeing them as dark shadowy figures or as white light translucent type ghosts if they're real. So does this prove or disprove? Like, you can use this information to prove it or disprove it, but since we don't know, a true skeptic would not jump to either assumption because we don't know. Further oddities. If you look at something red straight ahead, you are more likely to notice red objects in your peripheral vision at the same time, though objects in peripheral vision still look black and white. You will also notice the motion of all red objects in your visual field. This could explain why some objects in our peripheral vision may become more noticeable even when they don't change or move. It is bound up in something called attentional focus. It is just another oddity of the way our perception works that it could explain certain anomalous observations. And it's true, it could explain them. Since we don't know the real, I mean, maybe 1% of all of these misidentifications really are exactly what this article stated. Or maybe 90%, or maybe 99. But what about all the other ones? How does it help prove or disprove the existence of shadow people? The other interesting point is a lot of shadow people I've never seen the glowing red eyes, but if your periphery is not capable of seeing red, why would they be seeing shadow people out of the periphery with red eyes?
I see what you mean.
So that's also kind of anomalous. Pretty weird. Pretty weird. All right, so that's basically the scientific angle of how peripheral vision works versus direct vision, with cones and rods, the differences, the wavelengths, the colors, the movement detection. So it's pretty interesting because if shadow people are real, then that scientifically perfectly explains why they would be more likely to be seen from the periphery. So you wanted some more scientific thoughts on it. I mean, I gave you a bunch of scientific data. What do you think now?
I find that interesting when you look at the red and straight ahead, and you can see more red in the background. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the eyes are definitely very, very complex and equipped for different situations. I mean, it's pretty fascinating how the human eye is designed and everything that it can do. You still think it all came from a rock?
I don't really think about anything.
Oh, that needs to be on your mug. Maxwell Powers. I don't really think about anything.